Come on and cry me a river. Cry me a river. I cried a river over
Hello everyone and welcome again to this Monday emission, Monday the 16th of March 2026. I hope you're doing fine and well. I'm doing okay. So for today, what do we have? We have a lot in line. Let's see how far we can go today with my spectacular reading. Okay, I'm trying to choose not so hard articles for reading in a better way and not making you suffer as always. My disclaimer. For the new people maybe expecting some spectacular lecture here, but no. I'm just reading very slowly articles that I find very interesting. I curate articles for you. 8 hours a day finding articles for you and maybe some videos too. Also videos today. We have a video about, let me find it, let me show you. First in line, we have academic papers from the 1960s reveal how the CIA funded mind control program came to Australia from 2021 by Joey Watson. Then we have a short read hit because it's behind the paywall, but it's worth to read. Organisms are musicians, not machines. This is about two kind of paradigms, scientific paradigms in biology we're gonna try to understand. We have a short part of the article here, but then we have one more about it that is complete. Understanding how genetic motives conduct the music of life. Yes, about music and biology. Then we have How Your Brain Predicts Itself by John Vervaeke. Yes, Dr. John Vervaeke. Let's start, shall we? With what? Let me think. With this one. Yes. Let's commence. In the 60s, the CIA wanted to find out if hypnosis could control political figures, as portrayed in the film The Manchurian Candidate. I'm sure if there was already a film about it, it's because someone tried and kind of succeed, right? That doesn't mean always works. In the winter of 1960, Martin Orne, remembered as one of the 20th century's greatest psychologists, touched down in Sydney. Martin Orne? I never heard about him. I'm gonna have to find out. Without effing around, of course. The American professor was due to begin a 3-month sabbatical at the University of Sydney attracted by its world-renowned psychology faculty. Professor Orne was one of the leading researchers into hypnosis. What? I never listened or read something about him. Something the Sydney team, awaiting his arrival, was also interested in. They were all trying to apply a scientific approach to a practice long associated with magic and mystery. Wow, yes, hypnosis has hundreds of years of existence. The environment at the University of Sydney was electrically alive with intellectual stimulation, says psychologist Dr. Peter Zihan, who was completing his honors in psychology at the faculty during Professor Orner's visit. I suddenly found myself surrounded by people who were entrenched in the issue of hypnosis. This is Martin Orne. I wanna know about him. But, unbeknownst to the Sydney University staff and students, documents recently retrieved by the ABC confirm that Professor Orne was receiving funding from the secretive intelligence program MK Ultra, which was in turn founded by the CIA. Orne was a keen psychologist. What is a keen psychologist? Well regarded for his skepticism and scientific rigor, but the CIA had questionable motives. Sleep, drugs, and Operation Midnight Climax. In the early years of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union were poised for nuclear combat. The United States became convinced that we were under imminent threat, says Stephen Kinzer, a former foreign correspondent at the New York Times. The population felt that the Soviet Union had the power, almost at a moment's notice, not only to destroy the United States, but to destroy the entire possibility of meaningful human life on Earth. The anxieties of US citizens were not just about their nuclear capacities. There was a widely held suspicion that the Soviets were developing mind control capabilities. Reports had emerged of American soldiers captured during Korean War, defecting to the communist side and seemingly renouncing the US. Yes, we shared something about this in my part 1 of the Alice in Wonderland technique. Yes, part 1, yeah, I'm sure. So they start to see how the US soldiers coming after being captured by the Soviets or the Chinese were talking about the defection from the subjects because some kind of interview technique, interrogation techniques from the Soviets. US intelligence concluded that the communists must be hypnotizing the soldiers. Alarmed, they decided that they needed to develop similar capabilities. This spurred the creation of the MK Ultra program. I think the Artichoke program is the predecessor. I'm not sure. I'm almost sure. It was, says Mr. Kinzer, a project to find ways for the CIA to seize control of the minds of other people. Over 100 experimental projects were set up under MK Ultra. 100. The project titles include phrases like aspects of magicians, art useful in covert operations or sleep research, and behavioral modification. Mr. Kinzer says that those working on MK Ultra experiments, often under extreme secrecy, would push ethical boundaries in the name of national security, of course. Always. So, doesn't matter if it is true or not. Maybe they also invented the stories of the Soviet techniques. But no, I know the Russians are great at hypnosis. For instance, in an operation known as Midnight Climax, the CIA employed sex workers in San Francisco, Mill Valley, and New York. They were instructed to bring their clients to a safe house and dose them with LSD, so researchers could assess the impact of the drug and, gosh, its suitability for use in military settings. In another example, the CIA funded experiments at the psychiatric hospital in Montreal, Canada, directed by the controversial Professor Donald Ewing Cameron. Professor Cameron's psychic driving. Yes, we also talked about psychic driving in our video titled Alice in Wonderland Technique. The Alice in Wonderland Technique, I'm sorry. So, Professor Cameron's psychic driving involves subjecting drugged, sleep-deprived patients to continuously repeated audio messages and a looped tape. Basically, psychic driving is the most brutal and simple method of brainwashing. You collapse the mind of the person with trauma, then you rebuild a new mind in this person with repetition, audio repetition, etc. Solve et coagula. Very simple and appears to be very effective because it's very extreme. Years later, a Senate hearing on MKUltra, yes, that's what we shared, concluded that some of these experiments represented a fundamental disregard for the value of human life, of course. The research and development program resulted in massive abridgments of the rights of American citizens, sometimes with tragic consequences, the 1977 report states. According to the Senate committee report, many participants felt the residual effects of the experiments decades after the program ceased. At least 2 died. Wow, tragic. The Human Ecology found, arguably, the most coveted of the CIA's mind control projects were those investigating the possibilities of hypnosis, with documents showing that it occupied up to 8 MKUltra sub-projects. At the time, pop culture led many to believe that hypnosis could be used to create a Manchurian Candidate. In 1962, film of the same name, starring Frank Sinatra and Janet Leigh, depicts a former soldier brainwashed into becoming an assassin. Some in the CIA believed hypnosis could be weaponized in real life in similar way. Instead of waging war, the CIA thought, we'll just find a way either to hypnotize leaders or to hypnotize entire populations, to control other people's minds from far away. Mr. Kinsey says, pretty much what we are watching right now, right? With the internet. The prize would be nothing less than a global mastery. Martin Orne, then a young professor at the Harvard Medical School, became a key part of this quest in the late 1950s. Look at him. I know, this is Dr. Peter Sheehan. Or not? I'm not sure. Orne is this one, right? A little bit more chubby. Yeah, this is Orne? Yeah, Martin Orne. The Vienna-born American psychologist, always the Austrian god, had worked in magic shows as a teenager and developed a keen interest in hypnosis. He had continued to research it throughout his career, and according to author John D. Marks, Professor Orne's rigorous scientific approach made him attractive to the CIA. In the late, this is Jazz with his ear flapping his ears from time to time. That's the sound in the background. My dog. Jazz. In the late 1970s, when researching his book The Search for the Manchurian Candidate, which exposed the details of the MKUltra program, Mr. Marks interviewed Professor Orne. Wow, we have to find that interview, who revealed he was regularly consulted by the CIA. According to Mr. Marks, Professor Orne knew about the program and also received funding to support his research on hypnotism. He was their man on the outside, their specialist who they would go to for ideas, about hypnosis, Mr. Marks says. In 1960, Professor Orne's work took him to the University of Sydney. Okay. The university was an intellectual spark in at times a culturally conservative Australia. Oh, so Australia used to be conservative? Wow, that's a new one for me. The psychology department, until the MKUltra Professor Orne arrived, the psychology department was renowned, particularly for its work on hypnosis. Oh. In the 1950s, there were 5 significant hypnosis labs in the world, 4 in North America and the other at Sydney University, under the guidance of Professor John Philip Sutcliffe and Gordon Hammer. So Professor Orne came to collaborate with some of Sydney's esteemed psychologists. His financial backing for the trip, however, came from a source with shady motives. In an article published in a 1965 edition of the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, in which Professor Orne and his colleague, Professor Frederick J. Evans, record the results of one of their key experiments in Australia, has been referenced by the ABC. On the first page, the authors acknowledge the contribution of the human ecology found. That's the shady source. A secretive organization used by the CIA to provide grants to social scientists and medical researchers investigating questions of interest to the MKUltra program. Yeah, the classical way to finance studies appearing to be private, but no. This study was conducted at the University of Sydney, Australia, during a visit by the senior author Orne, June-August 1960. It was supported in part by a grant from the Human Ecology Fund, or Fund. The paper reads, Dr. Zihan, who had studied under Professor Orne, says the researchers at the university were unaware that their work was CIA-linked. That particular experiment was at the University of Sydney. I'm curious about that experiment. While I was doing my honors years, this is Dr. Sheehan, and I had never learned that was CIA-funded, he says. Alternative explanations. The aim of Professor Orne's experiments in Sydney was to see if it was possible to get hypnotized people to engage in antisocial behavior. Pretty much the Manchurian Candidate method. If a subject could be made to perform tasks against their own wishes, the CIA could potentially use this power against opposition soldiers. That's basically the Millman experiment, right? Something like that in the 60s as well. Yale, I believe. Making people go against their own moral systems because authority says so, something like that, right? Shocking people because someone with a doctor appearance says so. Historical experiments had recorded hypnotized subjects doing almost anything. They could be made to steal, injure themselves, even attempt murder. Professor Orne wanted to test this. According to the article, he asked a group of hypnotized subjects comprised of Sydney University psychology students. So the psychology students were the subjects of the experiment. Wow. To perform a series of seemingly dangerous acts, including picking up a venomous snake and throwing a vat of nitric acid at an experimenter. Yeah, I saw a video about this in a more modern version from England. Ooh, this picture is interesting because he's proving that the person with these heavy boulders on his arms, he can endure much more in trance state than without in a normal state of mind, right? Let's continue. Professor Orne wanted to test this. According to the article, he asked a group of hypnotized subjects comprised of Sydney University psychology students to perform a series of seemingly dangerous acts. While many of the subjects completed these seemingly dangerous tasks, how much is many? Professor Orne did not necessarily conclude that hypnosis was responsible. Eager to find alternative explanations to why the participants had performed these actions, Professor Orne used a control group of non-hypnotized subjects. Clever. They also completed the tasks the researchers discovered. The subjects, Professor Orne concluded, knew at some level that they would be safe regardless of whether they were hypnotized. They judged correctly that researchers were simulating danger. Very interesting. In experiments with snakes, for example, the animals had been rendered harmless by the university's zoology department. In other experiments with nitric acid, the acid was simply a convincing colored solution. The subjects were not taught about this. The tasks are within the broad range of activities which are perceived as legitimized by the nature of the situation, the journal article reads. They were requests made by experimenters, viewed by subjects as responsible scientists in the context of a psychological experiment. Milgram experiments is the name of the thing I was talking about before. But if the CIA was looking to control the human mind in their Cold War battle against communists, Professor Orne's findings would have proven disappointing. No conclusions can be drawn from the present investigation about the potential use of hypnosis to induce antisocial behavior, Professor Orne wrote in the journal article. According to Mr. Marks, this skepticism was part of the professor's appeal to the CIA. Orne was the person they would go to in terms of hypnosis to say, "Do you think this is going to work?" And he tended to be a skeptic, he says. So, his skeptical and academic way of looking at it would have been useful in turning down half-baked ideas. This scientific approach is Professor Orne's legacy. In a career that continued for 4 decades, Professor Orne helped to establish what hypnosis could and couldn't do. and move it from the realm of magic to an established academic and clinical practice. I learned an awful lot from him, says Dr. Sheehan, Professor Orne's student and collaborator. There are lots of people out there that would love to think that you or I could do terrible immoral things under hypnosis, but I don't think that's true, he says. I think that experiment would have been absolutely pivotal in proving otherwise. I don't know. If you combine chemicals with hypnosis, with social pressure, with a lot of things, you can do practically anything. If you can have access to the history of a person and manipulate it according to that information, you are very much there. Okay. Thank you to the author named Joy Watson of the History Lesson. Oh, perfect timing. Next one, I have to read this part. It's just a short one. It's very intriguing. This is from December 2025. Organisms are musicians, not machines. Improvising cells and the new biology. The living cell, once thought to be a precise molecular factory, is turning out to be more like an improvising jazz ensemble. The old dogma, one gene, one protein, one function, has collapsed. Molecular biologist Iwa Grybowska argues that recent discoveries show that proteins can switch folds, shift shapes, or even remain gloriously unstructured, improvising their roles as they go. Wow! Genes are not blueprints, but texts, open to continuous interpretation by cells. Life, it turns out, is not built like a machine, but instead fluid, improvisational, and brimming with creative possibilities. Number 1. The old paradigms in biology, when Watson and Crick decoded the DNA in 1953 and the mechanism of protein making was discovered. We obtained an extraordinary tool to explain the inner workings of life. Yes, the basic principle of making one protein from one DNA gene, in between parentheses, gene, with the assistance of one messenger RNA or mRNA and several well-defined amino acid transporting RNAs, was so successful that it has been enshrined in millions of textbooks and not questioned for a long time. Ripples on this smooth surface appeared with the discovery of introns, non-coding parts or sequences within genes that are not expressed in RNA, and so apparently don't contribute to determine the protein, and splicing, basically cutting and pasting the relevant parts of the genetic code to construct working mRNA and leaving behind introns. Later, alternative splicing was discovered, which directly contradicts the basic principle of one protein per gene, because it involves making several different working mRNAs from one gene. Several good explanations have been proposed for the role of splicing in general and alternative splicing in particular, mainly focusing on regulatory functions. But a big question remained: Why do all organisms, and especially more complex organisms, have this vast amount of non-coding DNA polluting their genomes? Polluting? We disregard what we do not understand. Yes. So people call this mysterious genetic material junk DNA. Sounds familiar. I heard that before from Tori. So, once again. However, it should probably have been clear from the beginning that natural selection works at the level of the living cell and is both frighteningly effective and brutal. There is no place in the cellular economy for tolerating molecules that take a lot of energy to make and are of no use whatsoever. The functionality of this genetic material should have been considered axiomatic. We just had no idea what this elusive function might be. So, elusive functions. Proteins were considered the main output, the most important product, if not the only one of the genetic code. It was assumed that proteins are well ordered, have domains composed of defined elements of secondary structure, alpha helices and beta sheets. What are beta sheets? I don't know. Alpha helices sounds familiar, and that only these well-organized parts have important cellular functions. The poster example was always an enzyme well-structured fitting to the substrate like a lock fits a key. The lock and key model was proposed by Emil Fischer in 1894? What? It was also assumed that proteins have only one conformation, that is, one shape or structure associated with one function. This is the one gene, one structure, one function paradigm, the old one, of course. Okay, that's what we have from this article that is behind the paywall. But what about this one? I'm not sure. It appears to be very difficult, but whoever wants to go deep into this theme or subject, I'm gonna share the link of this peer-reviewed publication from Chalmers University of Technology about the same subject. If you wanna go deeper than I can. And what else we have? I think it's enough for today. Because we are now on X for 1 or 2 months that I'm paid to have my blue check and be able to stream live. So, hello there. I think this is enough for today. So, thank you very much. See you the next one. Have a nice one too. Goodbye and thank you. Next time we're gonna read this one.
cried a river.